Everybody, good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining me today. Happy Thursday. It's May 14th, and I'm so glad to have you here. And so appreciative of everyone that's been reaching out to me about some of the cool things we've been doing and the interviews. A lot of people reaching out recently about getting an interview scheduled. It just warms my heart so much. It's good stuff. And looking forward to connecting with you all more and more over the next few weeks. And I am entering the phase where I've got my kiddos for the next week. So it's going to be hit or miss, but we'll do our best. And for today, though, I do want to mention a couple quick things and we'll get started. If anybody wants to do an interview, please reach out to me. All the ways to reach out to me are beneath this video. Anyone that also wants to be part of our poetry slam in a few weeks, reach out to me. Anybody that wants to reach out to me for one-on-one peer support, anything like that, please let me know. And in terms of the channel, I also just want to mention I have been trying very hard to do the channel, to stay at it, and I do have some other odd jobs as well, but if anyone is able to support me, it's more important than ever. But I appreciate everybody that's been doing that. And that doesn't just mean money. Some people can't, but you can like and subscribe and share the videos, spread the word, whatever you can do. But we do have a guest today, and I'm so excited to bring her on. I'm going to get started here. Today we're speaking with Gail. Gail, how are you doing today?
Hi. I'm good,
Thank you so
Tim.
much.
How are you? Thank you.
Good. Thank you so much for joining us, and appreciate your being willing to be flexible. Gail, we had a schedule last week, and I had an issue with my internet, and so I appreciate so much you being willing to flex with me and meet today. But I'm going to give a quick bio. What was that?
It's benefits of work from home.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know too much about Gail, so we'll get to know you together with the audience. But Gail is a farmer, an artist, and a secular homeschool mom. She has her degrees in art and education and with minors in philosophy and psychology. And she's also a YouTuber. She has 2 YouTube channels. Please go like and subscribe. But also her story is a little bit different. Her story includes things like ghosts and visions and superstitions. So it's a little bit different than the normal interview we do. So I'm looking forward very much to hearing how this story evolves. I'm sure it's quite a bit of very, very fascinating twists and turns. But before we do get into the meat of your story, do you mind first just telling us a little bit more about yourself and some fun things, maybe some hobbies, and then we'll kick it off?
Sure. One of my main hobbies is the Society for Creative Anachronism. I'm a Laurel in that, and I do historic costuming, um, and make parchment, and like a lot of medieval illuminations. And I don't have any to show you here because I give them all away. But I do have, actually. Here, there we go.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. What I can't quite see exactly what is that?
Oh, hang on a second. It's just a little sculpture.
Okay.
They're fun.
And
it's from a medieval illumination. And
okay.
I just sort of made them out of polymer clay and a snail shell.
Very cool.
Those are the kind of fun things I do.
Yeah, very cool. I'm jealous. I love doing artwork stuff. I find that I never have enough time. I don't know if you feel that way sometimes with your kids, but I feel like there's never enough time to get to the art and the music and the poetry and all that. So anyone that can do it, I'm jealous of it. So keep it up. It's great to have a creative outlet. Is there anything else you wanted to tell us about yourself or your family before we get started?
We live on a family farm. We raise chickens right now. We used to have a lot more poultry, but we're exclusively chickens at the moment. We enjoy hiking, and we are we're a mixed religious family.
Okay.
But everybody seems to get along just fine, which is great.
Very cool. I'm sure I'll have some questions about that later as we get to that point in your story. That'll be interesting. Yep. Please remind me. But I'm so glad you're here. I know that we have we basically have sort of touched base a little bit here or there, but I really don't know a bulk of your story. I've seen some of the notes, but I'm looking forward to just hearing it right from you. So if you could take us back, what was it like growing up? What did you hear about? I usually say about Christianity, but in your case, tell us what you heard about anything supernatural, and I'll jump in with some questions.
It's quite a mix.
Sounds like
so predominantly my religious upbringing was fundamental Christianity, and this did not come from my parents. This came from my community. And then there's like a lot of folk religion and witchcraft and stuff like that. And so I got this big mix of religious and superstitious stuff going on.
What were your parents specifically?
have
Do they have?
so my dad was, I actually have to remember whether he's Presbyterian. My father was a Presbyterian. um, and so really, really super mainstream Christian. And my mother grew up in, I also have that written down here because I went to the churches. I can picture the churches in my brain, but I can't remember what they were. She was Pilgrim Congregational, but through her mother, she also had a folk religion that comes out of Ireland, France, and the Black Forest area of Germany. And so there's a lot of like folk magic that comes down through that, and superstitions and stuff like that. But of course, they were Christians. Um, like,
If you don't mind, could you tell us? Do you remember what some of the details were of what that looked like? I know what I imagine from like TV shows or movies of folk religion, but what was
yeah,
it
that's
like
not
practically
it.
growing up?
Yeah.
What did you see
So
in your childhood?
practically growing up, like we would sing songs to trees in the springtime so that they would bear good fruit. So you went out and you sang a song around your fruit trees. You midwinter you would give the ale to the fruit trees too. And there's all sorts of like calendar type rituals that you would do. New Year's Day, you take the broom and sweep the bad luck out of the house. And a lot of these things were within the Christian tradition in these countries, because they didn't give them up. But they just happened to be really, really strong in my family. My grandmother did things like reading tea leaves and palmistry. She played the fortune teller at the county fairs. And she would read people's cards, and she was really good at it because she was really good at reading people. Like I'm very good at reading cards because I'm very good at reading people when they've sat down and talked to me and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, here's what's going on. And I don't know if this actually means anything here. And people are like, whoa. And I'm like, no, okay, I just took you for a ride.
You're breaking up a little bit there.
I
I'm
don't
not
get
sure if
paid
we
to
have
do that.
internet connection.
Oh,
Can you
I'm
hear me
sorry.
okay?
Can you hear me? I can
I
hear
can.
you.
You're just
Can you hear
it's
me?
freezing quite a bit, but yeah, that's
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think we're okay. Fingers crossed. There's your
Hopefully,
superstition
we're
for you.
supposed to have a storm come through, so my internet might be spotty. Hopefully, it won't totally break up.
Okay,
Um,
we'll hope for the best.
so I was raised on ghost stories. My grandmother saw ghosts, and she was adamant that these were real. And she actually moved out of several houses to get away from the ghosts. And my mother saw ghosts, and she raised me where seeing ghosts was normal. And the first time I saw a ghost, I was 2, and I didn't really think anything of it because, of course, you're going to see ghosts. I should mention that I have a bit of a unique brain. Other people have this type of brain too, so it's not like super unique. It's just like it goes into like only a few type of people have this type of brain. I am autistic, and I have what's called hyperphantasia, where in my imagination I can actually see things. Like if you say, picture yourself in a forest. The forest springs up around me like with a bunch of trees, and I'm standing in the forest and I can see it like ghostly images. And I know that there are other people who see the world this way. I've met quite a few of them. I know there are other people who have very early memories. I don't know if you saw it on my Facebook page. I took an unofficial poll who has memories of infancy, and there are several people who popped up and they're like, yeah, I have pretty vivid memories of infancy, or I have snapshots from before I was 2, and that type of thing. So it's not all that abnormal. But if you go on Google, it's like, oh, only 100 people have this. I'm like, no, it's way more than that. You've only asked 100 people who said they did.
So in terms of your religion, you mentioned that you were still consider yourself Christians. In what sense would you have called yourself a Christian, or at least would your parents have called themselves a Christian, as far as you know?
So dad is definitely a Christian, 100%, no questions. I was not baptized as a baby because when my mother called around to me baptized, they weren't church members. They just moved back to New York when they had me. They wouldn't let my parents and my would-be godparents in the doors at the same time, because it was a weird combination of Christianity. My godfather was Seventh-day Adventist. My godmother was
Okay.
Catholic. How they ended up getting married, I don't know. Um,
That's quite a combination. Yeah.
and yeah, isn't it? And so we couldn't find a church who would let a Presbyterian, a Pilgrim Congregational, Seventh-day Adventist, and a Catholic in the doors at the same time. And so my mother just gave up. And my dad was very upset that I did not have an infant baptism. And my mom was like, just, it's okay. There's churches that are okay with this, right? Yeah, try finding one. And so when we moved to our current house, my childhood home, dad said, okay, she has to go to church. And so the two closest churches that had the most children in them were the First Baptist and the Wesleyan. And dad works shift work, and he's half deaf. He's been half deaf his whole life. He does not go to church. There's no point for him. Back then hearing aids were not great. It was just a waste of his time. And mom had a farm. So, you got to feed the animals. And so she didn't, she rarely went to church with me. There were only a few times where she would pop in and actually go to church with me. For the most part, I got in a car with people and I went to church, or I would go to church with friends once we got involved in the community. And so a lot of times I didn't even know what church I was going to. There was one time we went to this little church up in the hills of Appalachia, and they had snakes, and the snakes were making noises with their tails. And I was like,
Like the congregants were handling the snakes?
Yeah, they had the snakes in the boxes, and they were like waving their hands, and like they were in trances, and they would dance with the snakes, and I was like, ah.
Wow, that's amazing. But your family wasn't what you all did for the regular church then, most days, most Sundays?
No, my family did not go to church. For the most part, my mother went with me a couple times. And there were the two churches that were the main ones that I went to were the First Baptist and the Wesleyan. And they were very, very conservative. Now, the First Baptists, that's where most of my religious trauma comes from. The first time I met Pastor T, and I don't want to use his full name. He has since passed away, but I don't want to out anybody on that type of stuff. He kneeled down and he looked at me. He was like, "You're going to go straight to hell if you die." And I burst into tears. Because of course I was 4, but it was dramatic that this man is telling me that I'm horrible and awful and evil.
Yeah,
and
that's a little
I had been
intense.
excited
Wow.
to be there before that. and it did not improve.
Well, when we say religious trauma, you really got it. That's crazy.
Oh yeah, it did not improve. The Wesleyans were quite nice. I actually really liked them. I had a lot of doctrinal issues with that, where I was questioning a lot and I didn't get answers that I was expecting to get. And so I was very frustrated there, but I didn't have trauma there. They were pretty nice. I still have friends who went to that church. It's not like I've cut off the entire community. Like the First Baptist, I don't talk to them anymore. But I do still live in the community, so I do have to be nice. I don't want to be mean to anybody. So we did pray before meals when Dad was here. And we went to Easter church, and I think that was pretty much it. But I mean, when I was growing up, I was in Awanas, I was in VBS, I was in youth group, I went roller skating with them, I went to church camp. If they could shove me in church camp 3 times that summer, I was in church camp 3 times that summer. And I didn't mind because church camp had horses.
Wow, very nice. That's better than my BBS. So you were then being very much exposed to the Bible and the idea of the gospel message and
Yes.
salvation.
Yeah. And because I was an undiagnosed autistic kid, and I have a very, very logical brain that if you say that this is true, then the facts must check out, right? The square must square itself. And things were not squaring. Things that would be said in church would be conflicts with each other. And I listened very carefully because, of course, this was very important because this was my immortal soul. And of course, I love Jesus, right? Because they told me I had to love Jesus. And but then I was like, but this doesn't make sense with this. So why doesn't this make sense? And they were like, oh, you just have to have faith. Well, you can't tell an autistic kid that they just have to have faith. They aren't going to know what that means. They're like, unless you give them an instruction book on how to have faith, that's not going to happen. And they just did not have the patience. There were a lot of kids. I mean, we're a very small town. I want to say that there were like 30 or 40 kids in that group. Like every kid in town was in that group. If they weren't in one, they were in the other. And so it was very chaotic. And I was a girl, so therefore I was definitely a second-class citizen. This is, I mean, very conservative. There was at one point the First Baptists wanted women to wear head coverings. Nobody did it. But it was that kind of like high demand stuff. Women weren't supposed to wear pants. Your dress had to be 4 inches below your knees minimum. You were supposed to wear gloves. Like it was that kind of environment. And I think that the first cracks happened when I was pretty little. I want to say like 5-ish. So it happened like within a year when I started church, because I started church at 4. And so the first cracks happened around 5 when the first school teacher said, you need to hate your parents. And what she meant was you need to hate your parents in comparison to how much you love Jesus. But when she said you needed to hate your parents, I was like, that's not cool. Like I could not fathom that, because I loved my parents the most of anybody on this entire earth. Like, why would you tell a 5-year-old that? That's nuts.
It's crazy that they wouldn't clarify that a little bit. That's really, that's again, so much trauma, so much intensity.
Yeah. Yeah, and they were very intense. And they said that if you set your parents up as an idol, if you ever loved your parents more than you loved Jesus, then he would send you straight to hell. And I have a whole series on my YouTube channel that's called Straight to Hell. And that's like, that was their tagline, you'll go straight to hell. And so I do want to talk a little bit, like moving a little bit into the spookiness of things, because this is happening at the same time as I'm being indoctrinated in this high control, conservative fundamentalist environment. And I do also want to say that not all churches are like this. I've taken I forget what it's called, where you do the, like, how high control is your group, like, is it a cult? And one of them was not a cult. Like they were just a fairly normal church, and the other one was like, yeah, this is totally a cult. So I do want to make that distinction. Right. The First Baptist, this one, definitely a cult. So at the same time as I was learning about all of this, I was still seeing ghosts, and I was getting more and more ghost stories from my friends, because the area that we live in is like high tourism on ghosts. And at the time, back in the 80s, it was a thing. People would actually travel here to go on ghost walks and stuff. And they still have those today, but they're like a little bit more sanitized. Back then, it was like the Wild West of spooky tourism. And so, like, there were like haunted can I say those words? Haunted house maps where people would go and try and see ghosts and stuff like that.
That's kind of cool. It's quirky but cool.
I mean, today, like I said, today they're like the actual businesses. You book your haunted house tour and you stay in the asylum and whatever else. And back then, they were just like derelict ruins. And so I mentioned that the first ghost I saw was the lady in purple, and that was when I was 2. And then there was another one, and I'm actually not sure if she was a real person or if she was like an imaginary friend or what was going on with this. But she said not to touch her. None of my other friends remember her, but we were so little, it's possible that she was real and they just don't remember. but her name was Robin and she had red hair and she hung out in the lilac bushes and I played with her and we made mud pies and it was fun. But every time I went to like directly play with her, she was like, don't touch me. And then I would look down and when I looked back, she was gone. So I still don't, to this day, I still don't know if this girl was real.
Wow.
But
It's amazing how to
because
think about
my,
how the mind works, like to think that you really don't know. Did you make it up
yeah,
in your mind, or because some of this
yeah,
stuff sounds like you were so preconditioned for it all. It'd be easy to think that your mind was just making it
yeah,
real.
yeah, I was totally primed. There was one day I was playing with my friend who lived at the bottom of the hill. And we were actually talking about this. I was like, do you remember that day? And she was like, yeah, I remember that day. Um, and we both have the same type of imagination and the same type of memory where we see these things, you know, they, when we imagine them, if you say apple tree, I can picture an apple tree over here. Um, and there was one day when we were playing and we were telling scary ghost stories and we thought we saw somebody coming through the bushes at us and we both ran away and there was nobody there. You know, it wasn't real. But we were so into our imaginations and we were so convinced of this and we were so steeped in this that we were like, oh wow, that was a real ghost, and we scattered, you know, we ran away. Um, and these things did not end as I got older. You know, usually when you get to be like 7, 8 years old, you stop seeing these things, and I didn't. Like there was one Easter. I think I was 7. I'm pretty sure I was 7 years old, and I had had a fever. And I was sleeping on the couch because I wasn't feeling well. And I woke up and I saw the Easter Bunny. And I did not believe in the Easter Bunny. The Easter Bunny was not something that was like a thing in my house. But 6 foot tall Egyptian style god in a gray tweed suit. And I could see the TV through him. And then he disappeared in a sparkle of glitter, right? Like it was weird. And I was like, I think I'm still sick, but I am definitely awake. And like it sounds so weird, but because I was so primed to believe in these things, I'm like doubting, was that a dream or was that real? That had to have been real because I was awake. Um, and we can, I have it in my out, I have an outline that I'm looking at for your viewers, which is why I keep looking down. But I will talk about what that is. There's a scientific thing, like we know what psychologists know what that is. It's something that actually happens in your brains at a certain time, and it wasn't the Easter Bunny.
That's crazy. It's funny, as a quick aside, um, you're reminding me when I was years ago, I had severe insomnia. And I remember one of the medicines that the doctor prescribed, I was so powerful. I only took it for like 2 days and stopped. It's like, there's no way. But I remember seeing pirates around the bed. Like, you know, I'm
Mhm.
wide awake. And I had an hour-long phone call with somebody from church. And the next day, they're like, "Oh, so great to talk to you." I'm like, "I haven't talked to you in a while." Like, "No, we talked for an hour last night." Like, "I don't remember." But it's just crazy how it's almost like there's a parallel between the psychosis of the, you know, some
Yeah.
hardcore medicines can give you, and the way that
Oh,
our brains just
definitely.
make it real.
Yeah. Um, so let me quick go down my outline to make sure I'm not missing stuff. And I apologize to your viewers for the outline. I do have a brain injury, and so I don't remember things
Oh,
perfectly
it's
as to how
no worries.
like
Yeah,
how I
please look away. It's I use
um
notes all the time. Do what you gotta do.
okay, good. So I I want to go back to the First Baptist Church here. I was too old for an infant baptism. They could not just magically baptize me. No magical water spell to save you from the fires of hell. Okay, I was too old. So I had to have a believer's baptism. I had to go through Sunday school and then have, you know, like accept Jesus into my heart and be made anew and blah 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 blah, right? They had a whole saying that I used to have memorized and I don't anymore. Um and I, being a kid who saw ghosts, fully expected to see the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ come to me in the flesh and say to as I'm praying that yes, because you've prayed to accept us, we accept you, and therefore now you're a Christian, and that's how that's going to work, right?
Makes sense. He has the Holy
Now,
Ghost.
Holy Ghost never showed. Until later. We'll talk about that later. But yeah, that never happened. And it was very traumatic for me because I was being told that this is supposed to happen in this way. And this is so frustrating to him. As I've been on this second deconstruction journey where I'm actually learning about these things to actually pull them apart and become a healthy person again, because deconverting is fine, but if you never deal with all the stuff that hurt you, it comes back to bite you later on in physical problems. The mental stress and childhood trauma will come back if you don't deal with it.
For sure.
And so that's why I'm on this journey right now. But I fully expected this to happen and it didn't. And what I learned is that there are very few denominations that actually require the indwelling of the Holy Spirit. And I just happen to be unlucky enough to be in one of them. Most of them are just like, yeah, you just say the magic words and then you do the little water thing and it's all good. There's no mystical stuff that goes with it. But this one, man, they were high on the mysticism.
Now, a lot of churches,
so that just,
a lot of churches say that the way you know is you speak in tongues. Was that part of it?
I don't remember anyone ever speaking in tongues, but they could have. That it's just not in my memory. It's entirely possible that they were, because there were so many, like, people would dance in the aisles a little bit, but then they were also at the same time very reserved. There was a lot of like hands up in the air like this. They didn't rock out or anything because they were all a bunch of stuffy old white people. Like, we got yelled at for doing piggyback rides in the aisles.
I'm sorry,
you
you froze there. Say it one more time. You got in trouble for what?
Oh, we got in trouble for doing piggyback rides in the aisles. We used to do, like, kids. I was one of the bigger kids, and so I would give the little kids piggyback rides up and down the aisles.
Oh no.
And I got yelled at for that.
Crazy.
So also at this time, and I do have to give a content warning here. I'm going to talk about SA. I was a child sex abuse victim from the ages of 4 to 8, and my abuser used the threat of biblical forced marriage to get me to comply. And I had been to a shotgun wedding, and so I knew that this was a thing that could happen. The bride was pregnant. She did not want to be with the person who she was being forced to marry, and the gun was there for her. And this happened in my community. Like, there a lot of bad things happened. Like, I'm smiling about some of it because I do have good memories, but a lot of bad things happened. That was not a happy marriage. Things did not go well. They never should have gotten married. And so I believed this person that this would happen. And so I kept my mouth shut. And I also believed that this was going to condemn me to hell. Because, of course, I'm also getting all the purity culture stuff happening, and women are evil, and you're temptresses, and, you're Jezebels, and whatever else. And, like, I'm for. Like, there was no choice in this. There was, like, this had nothing to do with me. And, when I hit puberty, he moved on to the next victim, because I was no longer in his interest range, and I was free, but then somebody else was being hurt. And I don't know what he used on that poor kid to gain her compliance, but it went on for quite some time. Eventually, a bunch of us who were his victims got together and told, and nothing was done. Welcome to America.
That's insane.
Yeah. So I wasn't his first. I wasn't his last. It is that. Now, I will note that did not happen in the church. This person just used religious threats to gain compliance in my case. So, but within the religious community where we were in, it was not unusual to force people who had engaged in sexual activity together to get married. at the Wesleyan church, some of the boys would stand outside and talk about their girlfriends. And, well, I really want to marry this girl. Well, just force her to have sex and then she'll have to marry you. And that it was not unusual.
Well, I've never heard of that, but
So
I'm not entirely surprised in one sense, unfortunately, but it's still shocking to hear it. But I've never heard of that before, and that's pretty pretty insane that would be something that, I mean, you'd think that even just the fact that, there's going to be parents involved that are going to raise their kids, quote unquote, the right way, certainly
mhm.
raise little boys who would have mottos such as, respect girls and boys don't hit girls and things like that. And it sounds like it was quite the opposite in that community.
No, it
That's
wasn't. No, we had women in the church with black eyes all the time. They were told to submit to their husbands, that they were not being submissive enough. The I don't want to be crude on your channel. The women's
you can
group
be crude on my channel.
circle.
You can be very
Okay,
crude
all
on my
right.
channel.
I was trying to phrase it nicely, but the women's group circle at the First Baptist, there was a woman who came in with 2 black eyes, a broken cheekbone, broken arm, like she was in rough shape. And they were planning on helping her escape. They had raised money. There was a safe house for her, and somebody told, the minister found out. We thought, in terms of the women's group, that this was a viable reason for divorce. We were wrong. We were told that she needed to submit harder, that she was not upholding her wifely duties, that this was not a permissible reason for divorce, that, this was all her fault. And if she were a better wife, she wouldn't be doing this. She shouldn't provoke him. And,
Wow.
they were full on high control cult. Women were nothing. Like, I'm not kidding about the shotgun wedding. Like that, it was that degree of, I'm not kidding about this being a cult.
Yeah,
it was
I don't
that
think I've ever
degree
heard
of
a lot of
high
these
control.
things.
Um,
That's to a level. I mean, I've heard of high control in different contexts, but this is a whole new level.
mhm. And so I kind of got off of my script there, so I'm a little bit, my thoughts are a little bit lost there. But so yeah, we had like it was like this pressure pot that we were under, where you had to dress a certain way, you had to act a certain way, you had to be a certain way, and you, not only that, you had to have the appearance of. And so if something was going wrong, it clearly was not safe to say so. I mean, this woman is sitting in the pew next to me with black eyes and a broken arm, and she is not allowed to escape. So if I say something, what are they going to do to me? Like, I was 6, I was like 4 to 8 years old. I was little. And because I was attending this church with friends and not with my family, there really wasn't anybody to talk about. Like, I didn't have a trusted adult to talk about with these things, because hours or a whole night would go by. Like, if I spent Sunday night onto Monday with my friends, it would be Monday afternoon before I saw my mother. I would come when I came home on the school bus. And so by then, there's this time buffer in between where I might remember the assignment for next week. Oh, Mom, I have to bring blah, 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 blah for church next week. But all of those big, heavy, emotional things had sort of like settled out with no adult guidance. And the people who were supposed to be guiding us were like this heavy, super conservative indoctrination, wackadoodle. They were wackadoodle.
Yeah, I can think of some meaner words to
And
say, but yeah, that's a good place to start.
like I live here, I'm not going to be super mean. And the thing is, these people were victims of this too. And I do have to keep that in mind, is that the situation that they were in, they were so far into this that, I mean, people died, and they just, there was one, I hadn't intended to talk about this on here because it doesn't have anything to do with ghosts, but he had them pass up their prescription medications as a test of faith, and people died.
Wow.
And there were no repercussions. It was God's will.
Like the snake, so like the snake handling stuff. Like if you believe in God, handle these poisonous snakes, venomous snakes. So instead, it's like give up your heart attack medicine and trust God.
Yeah, yeah. And a man literally died from a heart attack less than a year later.
Mm-hmm. Oh wow.
Yeah,
that's insane.
And his wife was comforted. Your husband is in heaven with our heavenly Father. Wow. I'm like, are you kidding me?
And people wonder why we do what we do, why we speak up.
Yeah, right.
just don't be a Christian and go quietly into the night. Don't speak up about this stuff. Like, I don't think so.
No way. Like, no, I'm talking about this. We need laws. Gosh darn it.
We really do.
Seriously, if the herbal companies have to follow laws that say that you can't make false medical claims, then the preachers need to too. Sorry, not sorry.
100%. Especially if it's going to include things like medicine or blood transfusions and things like that.
And the good part about this, though, is I did go to 2 different churches, and in the Wesleyan church, other Pastor T, both of them had names that started with T, was a very nice man, and he was very supportive of mental health, and he was like, do not stop taking your medications. Because, of course, it's a small town. He knew what was going on. And they almost came to blows a few times. These guys did not like each other. And, he was very good about countermanding a lot of the bad stuff that was happening in the other church. He was like, okay, we are not like these guys. Don't be like that. That is not the love of Jesus. So I did get a little bit of a balance between crazy cult and normal Christian. So bringing this back, let's stay in the First Baptist thing, but let's bring it back to the ghosts. All right. So I was also a kid who saw ghosts, right? And one of Pastor T's favorite things was to talk about sin and all of the reasons why you're going to hell. And he loved Exodus 22:18, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And this was the middle of the Satanic Panic. I don't know if you had any Satanic Panic stuff that happened in your upbringing at all.
A little bit, but not like yours.
It was crazy. Like they would burn toys. You had to like throw out all of your stuff. I had family friends who liked D&D, and their mother was like, I am not burning the D&D stuff. This is expensive. My kids can play D&D. I know what the rules are. This is not demonic. So that was actually kind of cool. But so not everybody listened to him. But he was very big on thou shalt not suffer a witch to live, and he brought in like the Witch of Endor into this, where the witch calls up who is it, Samuel, that she calls up?
I think it was Samuel
or Saul.
Was it?
Or Solomon.
That's you know what, I know this one and I don't remember. I'm gonna look it up.
Remember.
Okay, see here. At the request of King Saul, summoned the prophet Samuel. Okay.
I knew that there were a bunch of S names involved in there. And because I was a kid who saw ghosts and my pastor is linking these things together, I was like, I'm screwed. I'm going straight to hell. I just had like, it was just this hit after hit after hit of you're evil, you're horrible, you're bad, you're awful, you're whatever. And I was like, there's no hope for me. I'm done. I'm cooked. And so I had nightmares about hell. And then just adding in the Jehovah's Witnesses who would come and visit, and I did Bible study with them, and they had like the whole end times tribulation thing going on. So I had nightmares about that. And hang on a second, I need to check my notes. So I would pray for these ghosts to go away. I would pray to God to make me no longer see ghosts, because I wasn't calling up these things. And we'll talk about what they are in a little bit so that people don't think, oh, wow, this lady's really crazy. But, I was primed to believe in what I was seeing. And I was really seeing these things, but that's not just, it doesn't mean it's real.
Right. Your mind makes it real.
Doesn't mean Yeah. When you're feeding a child's imagination who has a very vivid imagination, things become very, very real.
Yeah.
So like I saw a bunch of ghosts occasionally. These ghosts never did anything. They were not scary, they were not gory, they were not like anything that was interacting with me. They never spoke to me. They were just people like standing there minding their own business, and then they would suddenly disappear. Um, and that's a very specific type of hallucination. Um, and so but I didn't know it was a hallucination. I thought they were ghosts. Um, so and when I turned 7, one of my youth ministers gave me a Bible, and I read it. And I think you had a guest on either yesterday or the day before, and I was like, wow, word for word, almost the same. Like somebody gives you a book, and of course you start at the beginning and you read it, right? And I right away was like, this God is evil. Straight up, this is not a good God. Because the squares weren't squaring. And so I was questioning everything. I would pull the Bible passages that I had read and I would check on the notes. Hyperlexic, I think is the term, where I was reading early and reading prolifically, and like remembering everything that I was reading. And so, um, it like all of these things were stacking up, and I was like, there's no way, this doesn't make sense. You can't actually practice this religion. Like something is wrong. And so because both of my churches were inerrancy, they both told me I just had to have faith, and I needed to stop questioning God, and that things would become clear to me. I had to pray for discernment. I'm trying to remember what the other buzzwords were. I mean, this was a very long time ago. um, and nothing ever squared. And of course, nothing squared because it doesn't square, because these were stories collected over centuries, written by multiple different authors for different purposes. Uh, you know, like it's not going to square.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
One of the ones that I got yelled at most about, that I recall being yelled at most about, was the Ishmaelites and Amalekites bouncing Joseph back and forth between them on the way to Egypt. And the real reason why you have two different people groups selling this man is because you have two different cultural traditions, and it was more important to preserve the tradition in the literary sense than it was to tell a coherent narrative. Uh, that's an explanation I could have accepted. And in more mainstream Protestant denominations at the time, I think that the supplementary hypothesis would have been out, but I know the documentary hypothesis was out then, and that would have solved it. I wouldn't have had any more questions. Um, but because I was in literal truth, inerrancy, like we actually had some flat earthers in the congregation. Um, like we're way out there.
Why am I not surprised?
It's like zero surprises at this point. Um, the one congregation, the Wesleyans, did not believe in evolution as far as I remember, but they were like, yeah, the earth is round and it's old, and you can trust science, and we're a little on evolution, but whatever. And the other one was like, no, 6,000 years old, and God made everything individually, and they were super hardcore about that. So as I'm reading this text, it's not making sense to me. And I'm questioning things, and I'm getting yelled at for questioning things, and I'm already dealing with all of this trauma that I'm not able to resolve within this religion. I already feel like I'm condemned. And so I just started people watching, rather than, like, my faith was just cracked all to hell. I'm this little kid who's lost. I don't have my parents with me. I want to be there because that's where all the kids are. And I am having fun, but I'm also taking like 10 points of psychological abuse every single Sunday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And,
Wow.
and so I started really listening to the sermons and realizing how horrible these things were. Like, they're telling us to hate people and they're telling us that certain people aren't as good as we are, and that like, and I'm like, this isn't okay. Um, and then I would start to watch people, and I'm watching like the man who was hit his wife. I'm watching how he interacts with his children when we're supposed to be praying, and he's like punching his children. Like not like bam bam in church, but like, you know, he's jostling his kids in church. Um, and that like who's in church that's at the bar on Saturday night, and then they're back in church on Sunday, and they're Baptists, they aren't supposed to be drinking. And who's cheating on their wife, and I started watching all these things, and I'm like, these people are not living the way that they're supposed to be living. Like I walked in on the past oh god, I walked in on the pastor kissing somebody who wasn't his wife. That man hated me forever.
Wow, you need to write a book someday. This is something that we should turn into a movie or something.
It would be a comedy of errors. It needs to be a Monty Python thing.
Well, it'd be a comedy and a tragedy and a bit of a crime thriller too. Well,
it's crazy. I go through this in my head and I'm like, did this actually happen? Because it sounds nuts. I mean, it really does. It sounds nuts. And I'm like, oh yeah, and I saw ghosts, and everybody's like, yeah, you're totally nuts. But it actually happened. Because this was a high control group. And so all of these, like, people are just people, you know, like, you're gonna go drink. People have alcoholism, and people cheat on their partners, and, you know, like, they do normal people things. But then when you concentrate it into this like pressure cooker of a religious, it gets gross.
yeah. And especially if
So
everybody is thinking pretty much the same thing, where the group think is there, and no one is really taking anybody to a state of accountability. I mean, you really see that, like, honestly, I know this is going to sound like a weird comparison, but I think it fits. The fact that the people who were in authority in that church were not held accountable, it makes me think is like it's a microcosm of what we're seeing with Donald Trump. He can get away
oh,
with all
absolutely, yeah.
kinds of horrible stuff for which
Yeah,
he should
Pastor
easily be in
T.
prison and disqualified.
Yeah.
And it sounds like your pastor too should have been disqualified and maybe more. And it's just like, if everyone accepts it, everyone says, "Oh, let's just turn a blind eye to it," it just keeps going. It's crazy.
Yep. I mean, these horrible things happened because they were allowed to happen. There were no consequences, and it was all instant forgiveness. If somebody did something wrong, say you're sorry. I'm sorry. Now say I forgive you. I forgive you. Forget it happened. Move on. Nobody learned anything. You know, there were no. There was no progress in terms of your emotions or your cognition or anything like that. Like, there were no lessons learned. It was just, okay, it's over, forget it, move on.
Yeah. And for a lot of churches, the idea of the purity,
dumb.
yeah, it really, and for a lot of the churches, the idea of the unity and the peace of the church is more important than anything. Like, there needs to be a sense of unity inside the church, but also a facade of appearance of unity to the outsiders, that we are one. We are not a split church. And some churches emphasize that to the point that, like, they try to, quell every storm immediately, because they want that the idea of we're two churches or we're three churches, or there's people arguing. They want it squashed, because that, to them, that ruins their ability to proclaim the gospel, because all of a sudden your church looks like a mess. Like, where's the power of the gospel? And so they want to make sure that it looks good, even though it's got nothing to do with reality. I've heard that so many times.
Yeah, we weren't ever supposed to take anything between church members to the police. If there was embezzlement, if there were sex crimes, if there was, like, if two guys got into a fist fight, you were not supposed to take that to the police. That was between you and the pastor. That it was very, very tight knit. So I do want to start talking about the cognitive end of things, of what was happening here. I was an undiagnosed autistic child. And there's the autistic urge to seek clarification and not know when to shut up. And because I didn't know this about myself, I was like, but I don't understand. I want more. And they were seeing that as being resistant to Christ and not being willing to hear the word, and questioning is, I'm trying to remember what the First Baptist doctrine thing is, but like questioning leads to doubting, leads to something. I think it's like destruction or something like that, where
Okay.
it's like if you question, you are on the path to hell.
Yeah, the slippery slope.
So no questioning.
Yeah, don't even start because you know where it ends. It ends in atheism or hell or something.
Yep. Well, it ended in hell. I don't think I'd ever even heard the word atheist.
Okay.
In the entire time I was in those churches, I don't think I'd ever heard that. There was a lot of talk about witches. Our town has a huge population of pagans and witches, and they're mostly ex-evangelicals. And they have actually been a huge, I got to use some Christian words here. They've been a huge blessing because they're there to catch people who are hurting. And I don't mean catch as in like capture. I mean like you're falling and they catch you. And they have had wonderful resources over the years for people who have suffered from religious trauma, because they've been there. And I mean, this is a community support thing. And it's kind of funny now to see their children having been raised in paganism. A lot of them were Wicca. I was never Wicca. That was not my thing. But it's interesting to see the second generation coming up through as adults now and how different they are from like my end of where things were. Because like it was like the Wild West. Wow. But we knew what was happening. And just introducing people to science was amazing. Anyway, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah,
But
I would think
that
people in
was,
that congregation, science would be an irrelevance, right? Basically, it's like if it doesn't
yeah.
mesh with what we think about the Bible, biblical interpretation, it's basically a non-starter.
Yeah, they told the kids to pass your science test and then forget it.
Of course.
We did not have a huge homeschooling community back then, which kind of
Okay.
surprises me.
Yeah, that is surprising.
Because I mean, today I homeschool today, mostly because the local school does not have the resources to help my son. He's dyslexic. But also because it's chock full of religious nuts down there. Like it would almost be like sending him to, it would almost be like the opposite of where sending him to public school would be like a religious homeschool education. And I don't want that for him.
Yeah.
So
That's
we
so
do a
sad.
lot of online stuff. Yeah, it is. And it's a tiny town. I mean, it's so small. And because we have the farm, we don't want to move. It's just, it is what it is.
So just so I'm understanding, you're literally, some of the people that you're thinking of as you're telling your story, they're literally within a few blocks or miles of you still?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. A lot of them are still my neighbors.
Pardon my expression, but
And
holy shit. Like,
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
honestly, I know what you mean about needing to stay there for the farm, but I think, gosh, I think if I were in your shoes, I'd have to split. I'd have to skip town eventually. Just be like, I gotta wash my hands of this stuff and move on. I'm just saying, I'm
I
not saying
moved
you're
away
wrong to do
for
it.
about
I'd
10
have a
years.
tough time doing it.
Yeah. I moved away for about 10 years after college, and life sort of brought us back here. And my husband and I are very happy. We don't shop downtown. We shop in the next town over. Works out pretty well. The view is wonderful. We love living here. It's, and I do have friends here. So like, and
Yeah,
it
well,
can be a little
it's your
bit
mission
scary.
field. It's your
Um,
mission field.
So, all right, I talked about that. Yeah, so basically when I hit about 8 to 10 years old, and I don't entirely remember when this happened, but I went from believing in Christianity and wanting this God to accept me to becoming a misotheist, and that's somebody who hates God. A lot of Christians are like, atheists just hate God, right? Well, there is a phase that people go through when they're transitioning out of this religion where they're like, I actually do hate this God. And I went through that before I was 10, because of all the stuff I was going through. So, like, I was evil for having dark hair and dark eyes. And if you think that was bad, try being black around here. I was evil for being a woman. I was evil for seeing ghosts. I was evil for being born a witch. I was evil for not being pure. I was evil for seeing too much. I always saw too much. I looked around and I saw too much. I was evil for liking the color red. Did you know that, Tim, did you know colors can be evil?
I did not. I'm getting a full education today.
It's like,
That's
it's
crazy.
it's,
And what, like
I
literally
just
just the
like
fact that you liked
red.
the color was upsetting to them?
Yeah. Yeah. I wore a red dress to church. On my YouTube channel, I have the little cartoon character of me is a little red triangle with and then a circle with dark hair. And that little red dress got me into so much trouble in church. So
Was that
much
like
trouble.
was it like the idea that a woman in a red dress is like a hooker on the street kind of thing, or something different?
It was the association with passions with the devil. The red is the devil's color, and so is black, by the way, just so you know.
Wow.
Um it was just craziness. Like it's just red.
Note to self, everybody: don't go through that town when you're driving through to vacation or something. Don't go through that town.
Just don't speed through the town. That's all. You can get gas here. It's okay. The only thing here is a gas station. Don't worry about it.
Wow. Mm.
Just go skiing in the hills. You'll enjoy yourself. I was evil for not forgiving. That was a big thing, is that I did not forgive easily. And they wanted that instant forgiveness, and no, I wanted to talk about it. No, we can't talk about it. You have to forgive. In your heart, you got to forgive. Just like God forgives. And I'm like, I don't think that's how that works. I read the Bible. And I tried. Like, I tried really, really hard to follow this religion, and I just could not do it. I could not make the squares square. And I got to the point where I was so severely depressed that I wanted to die. And of course, I'm dealing with all this other stuff too that is like traumatic for children. And I knew if I wanted to live, I had to leave it. I was being bullied for not being a Christian.
I'm sorry, you broke up there. Could you say that again? It's about
Yeah,
wanting to leave it.
I was getting bullied for not being a Christian. There was, and it got to be physical violence. There was a boy who karate kicked me in the back. And another boy pushed me up the stairs. I fell off my horse. I fell off the horse and broke my arm, and they pushed me up the stairs and I couldn't catch myself, and it messed up my knee. And Dad finally agreed at that point that I did not have to go to these churches anymore. Because of course then it cost him money. He's like, okay, well, they've hurt her several times now and we have doctor bills, so I guess it's fine if you don't go. But there was afterwards, after I left, there was a point where some of the church boys, not from my First Baptist, I want to be clear on that, though it could have been them just as easily, from another one of the super conservative churches, that caught some of us ex-church girls in the creek, and they threw stones at us, and they were fully intending to kill us. And we ran away, and we got up on the gravel pits. So we had the high ground, and we were throwing stones back at them. And it was probably about an hour of throwing stones back and forth. And the hair grew back on top of my head, but it's all white. This is not age. And some of it's age now. This is age, but this is not.
That's insane.
And luckily it grew back. Like I didn't have a bald spot on top of my head, but I was bending over to pick up another stone and they hit me right on top of my head. And like I've had to jump in ditches to not be hit by cars. And I know you're like, why do you still live there? Well, because farms are expensive. Like that's
No, I hear you. I'm sure it's hard, especially if you've got you know, a sense of connection there. But it's you're braver than me than me for sure for staying. I'd have a tough time, but I commend your bravery for it.
Well, like I said, I mean, I moved away for 10 years. Coming back was not an easy decision, but it was the right decision for us. Things have been a lot easier. I mean, people have moved away, people have grown up. People are actually not as crazy as they were. Like I said, the pastor has since passed away. Um, I won't say it's a great situation there, but the person who's there is a lot more sane now, so that helps a lot. Um, so through all of this, I'm absorbing all of these local superstitions too. Like there's a bunch of little kid superstitions where, you know, step on a crack, break your mother's back, right? Don't pick up a penny that's tails up. You can only pick up a penny that's heads up, because that's good luck. And if you pick it tails up, it's bad luck. So there was a lot of good and bad luck. Um, there were a few grandmothers in the area that were like highly superstitious as well as being highly religious, and they passed both of those things on to us. So things like not looking in a mirror at night, covering the mirror because you might see a spirit or a demon in the mirror. Um, and so every time I walked by a mirror, I was expecting to see like some kind of rah ghost face in it, right? And the other thing that I would end up doing is, I do want to actually talk about, I looked at my notes here. There are spirit jars that you'll still see in people's yards in the area. They tend to be blue bottles and they're upside down on a stick, and they're designed to catch evil spirits before they go into your house. And in the morning light, the evil spirit goes away. Um,
Hmm.
they're very pretty.
It's amazing. It feels like you reminded me a little bit of I went to I had an aunt out in Boulder, Colorado, and I remember once going there to visit, and there's a main street called Pearl Street, and I was a very conservative fundamentalist Christian at the time, and my parents warned me like, "This is the New Age capital of the world." And you'd go in and you'd literally see like stores, not just where somebody in there is maybe looks like a witch, but like just stores that advertise witchcraft and crystals. And you just like
Mhm.
as a Christian, you just almost feel like this presence, like, oh my gosh, like I can feel the demonic presence like just oppressing me even just by walking down the street. And especially if you'd walk in a store, you'd like there's crystals everywhere, like, oh my God, the demons are
Mhm.
here. You know, it's just it was but it sounds like you were that wasn't to me, that was like a one night event. That was like your daily life.
Steeped in it, absolutely steeped in it. And the thing is a lot of people who practice this type of witchcraft, and this type of like sign seeking and superstition and stuff, were Christians. So I was getting it from both sides. And so I mean, when you're a kid and you have adults telling you this stuff, you believe it, right? Um, so
Absolutely.
sign seeking was another thing that I engaged in. Like I want to, in Judges, there's this guy who like lays out a fleece, and if the fleece is wet or the fleece is dry, then God really wants him to do this, and he's like, I really
Yeah.
do want to make sure that you actually want me to do this, right?
I think it's
Um,
Gideon,
and
the judge
so
Gideon.
Gideon, yes, Gideon. Um, and so we would set up these little tests for like God to answer our prayers. Am I gonna pass my math test? If you know, if I see a yellow leaf on my way to the school bus, then I'm gonna pass my math test. And if I see a red leaf on the way to my school bus, I'm gonna fail my math test. You know, it's that type of, it's silly stuff, you know. But it was like we were all doing this, and it was all constantly reinforced by the people around us. Um, and so I will say I don't want to give away my location because again, I don't want to like dox people or like whatever, but I am in Appalachia, and Appalachia has a lot of superstitions. And we make bank on this. You know, this is part of our tourism thing. Um, but like the idea of demons and spooks and haunts and monsters and whatever else is just like talk about a funnel of things coming in, of believing, you know, just believing in fantasies. But again, tourism, yay. So
I
if you have
believe it.
locals who believe in it, you know, like, oh yeah, it's totally true. And everybody knows when you're lying, so you gotta believe it.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you ever see that movie, Room 1408 with
No.
Nicolas Cage? Nicolas Cage is his character in the movie is like some guy that goes to places like what you're talking about, and he sleeps in the
Mhm.
hotel to try to experience the haunting and hear the ghost
Mhm.
rising from the dead or something. And he just goes from hotel to hotel to hotel to hotel, and of course, nothing ever happens. It's just like, and
Right.
he writes books about it to try to make it sound scary, but in the end, he's like, I don't even know if there are ghosts. Like, I've been doing this for 20 years and
Right.
I never seen anything. And then in the movie, of course, the movie set up that he goes to a room and it finally becomes real
Mhm.
life and he actually experiences that kind of stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
hmm.
Um,
Well, can I ask just for context, were you at this point though still?
yeah.
I mean, the big picture, of course, to me is always Christianity. Um, were you
Mhm.
still, despite all this nastiness and all this nonsense, were you still clinging to the idea that you had a right relationship with God because of Jesus being your savior?
So the answer to that is probably not. And the reason is that I thought that Jesus was rejecting me. So I believed in this mythology. I believed in Christianity that this was true, but I didn't. I all of these people were Calvinists. Um, so I thought that I was not the elect, that I was destined for hell. I was not saved because the Holy Spirit never came to me. Jesus never came to me and said, yes, I accept your prayers. I never heard anything. I heard it was crickets. Okay. But I was
Mm.
never able to call up a ghost either. I just saw them by happenstance. Um, so, the question of were you ever a real Christian is a question for me. Was I ever a real Christian? I believed in this very, very deeply, but I never had the spiritual baptism. So was I ever a real Christian? But these other denominations say that that's not necessary, and I could have just gotten baptized. And I'm kind of pissed off about that. My life would have been a lot easier.
Yeah, man, oh man. It's in about 1,000 different ways, by moving one town over. That's crazy.
Yeah, right. But we you got to grow where you're planted. Um,
Exactly.
so that's what happened. So I did continue to go to churches throughout my teen years. I continued to go with friends, and I continued to try to be a Christian throughout this time. I kept trying to believe, and I kept questioning. I met some very wonderful people. Um, I really liked the Lutheran ministers I met, and they very kindly uninvited me to their church because there were a bunch of boys there who were very hormonal, and I was the only girl who wasn't related. And they were like, "Okay, you need to leave." um, and I got that one. I understood that one. Um, and uh, let's see. I tried to get involved with the Mormons a little bit, and that did not go over well. Like by that time,
Because of the
I
theology
recognized. No,
or
I
just the
actually didn't
community?
mind their theology. I recognized a cult when I saw one. Um, like they were very normal in their service, and I didn't mind
Okay.
that at all. It was just that when it came to the women's group, and then like we sat down and they were talking about the whole subservience thing again, and you know, it took me right back to the First Baptist, and I was like, you know what, I don't want anything to do with this.
I mean, what
That is
attracted you to go there in the first place? Was it the idea of the community?
It was community, yeah, and it was slightly different from what I had grown up with. I knew that their theology was not as strict in terms of behavior stuff. Sounds wacky now. Wow. Um,
When you can
like,
look at
did
a
those
group
words
that
just come out of my mouth?
when you can look at a group that makes you wear funky underwear, to be considered holy,
Yeah,
the white, what do
yeah,
they call them? The I don't know what they call the undervestments, whatever, but I don't know Mormonism enough to know the right verbiage, but you know what I
I
mean?
don't
The
know.
the
I
white
didn't
the
get
white
into it that
underclothes,
deep.
they have
Yes,
to,
yes.
when you can look at a group
Yeah.
like that and say they were more normal than your group,
Mhm.
that says a lot. That says an awful
Yeah,
lot.
it does. It does. Yes. And it's like the only wackier one I can think of is the one that had the noisy snakes.
Yeah,
Like, oh
yeah.
boy. Um, so when I was in my late teens, I actually did get involved in paganism. I'm not going to talk about this whole lot because it's not super relevant. There was far less woo involved in paganism than there was in Christianity.
Wow.
Much more friendly towards science. It was a very healing experience. Like, I made a lot of great friends. Um, and leaving that community was like nothing. Like, there's no problems. I'm still like friends with a lot of those people. It's just I just didn't want to be involved all that deep. And I became a deist for a long time, where I just thought that, like, the universe is God, and like this is why we're not getting prayers answered, because you are the universe. Like, we're part of this. It's like you're talking to yourself, right? And then I had a stroke. I had an ectopic pregnancy that we missed, and I almost died, and the recovery was terrible. Obviously, that baby did not live. I did. I lived. It's very important that I lived. I almost didn't. But when I recovered from that, my brain was changed in such a way that all of these ghosts were gone. All of these visions things were gone. I did not see them anymore. And I'm actually, I skipped ahead there, but I can revisit this. I want to revisit the Jesus thing, but
yeah, go wherever you want.
But I delved into like how to understand what happened to me, which is sort of where I'm gaining this more of an understanding of cognitively what was going on. But let's step back to Jesus for a moment, because you were asking me about Jesus. So let's finish that one up. So on my wedding day, I had an emotionally charged there.
I'm sorry, you froze there.
I was crying,
I heard,
and my friend.
I'm sorry, Gail. You froze there for a second. We heard on my wedding day, and then it went garbled. So start that sentence over.
Okay. On my wedding day, I had an emotionally charged few moments. A thing happened. I ended up leaving my own wedding, not for my husband. But he's fine. He's awesome. Husband, great. Yay. But I was very upset, and my friend was praying over me, and I had a vision of Jesus with the and we had a very nice talk about how murder is wrong, and I will not be doing that today. And and he calmed me down. He has a great sense of my vision. Jesus has a great sense of humor. I really appreciate him. This was not a conversion experience. I want to be very clear on that. And any Christians who are watching this are going to be like, why not? Right? Because real Jesus, first century preacher Jesus, who may or may not have actually existed, would not look like Da Vinci's boyfriend. Okay. I have a degree in art history. I was a working artist at the time. I was very much involved in oil paintings and stuff. And it was Da Vinci's Jesus. And so what happened was that my brain took over my other part of my brain and said, okay, this is your wedding. You need to not ruin it. You need to calm down. And it was just taking what my friend was praying for, personifying it, and having a dissociation event that was able to allow me, not real time, because it was like stretch time. It was only a few seconds real time. But in terms of stretch time in my brain, it was probably about 10 minutes that I had this conversation with Jesus. I'm going to just call him Jesus. And it calmed me down. It got me back to marrying my husband. We had a great day, and no one was harmed. I don't think I actually would have harmed this person anyway, but I was really mad. And everything was fine. So I'm on the live. Yeah, could you come get her? The cats are in.
Oh, no worries. So I was thinking you're a bit like Julia Roberts there. You're a bit of a runaway bride for a minute.
For a minute, yeah, I was. We were actually really worried about it. But it was okay. We found what we needed, and we got back to everything was fine. We got married. It was great.
I really hope you're planning to write a book. This stuff is really you needed to write this whole thing out. I think people would definitely buy it.
I have a YouTube channel.
Yep.
So the stroke did something, and then we're going to fast forward now several years to where the stroke happened. And the stroke did something else, and it made it difficult to lie. There is a scientific study, which Tim can post the link of that. I think that's my first link, which is study shows language loss may improve ability to spot lying, from the year 2000. It's called deception detection. And when somebody has a loss of language called aphasia, they will often compensate by looking at other means of communication. What the study did not do was ask people how they felt personally about telling lies. And just from my perspective, when I told myself a lie, it gave me a splitting headache. Like to the point where I would be incapacitated for the rest of the day. And how many lies do we tell ourselves every single day? We tell ourselves dozens of lies every single day just to get through our days. I can tell myself some lies now. It's been enough years that I'm moving past that injury, but it's still difficult. I still have a hard time with big lies. Little lies like, okay, you can do this. It'll be fine. I can handle those. So I didn't have no more prophetic dreams, no more visions, no more ghosts, no more of that. And it is more difficult for me to, like, when I was talking about the apple tree, where I can see the apple tree, it's harder for me to see the apple tree now. My visual cortex is not working quite as well as it once did. And I'm okay with that. You know, like it's a little bit of a sacrifice that I don't have to see these things now. And so when I had to stop lying to myself, I had to completely re-examine my worldview, because I would just be trucking along, not thinking about things, and I would tell myself a lie, and then I would end up with a giant headache. And so just out of pure self-defense and to be a functional human being after the stroke, I had to really be careful not to continue lying. So big questions like, is Jesus God? Well, my brain doesn't think so. And that's honest. You know, like, I can't make a fact claim, okay? But I can say what I truly believe is that Jesus is not God. Is God real? My brain doesn't think so. So I'm not making a truth claim there. I'm saying my brain believes that God is not real. Or at least not Bible God. Are ghosts real? No, it was just stuff in my imagination. It was just stuff that my brain was kicking out. So, you know, like all of these things that I was raised with, and I was politically very conservative, and I had to re-examine all of that too. And that happens to a lot of people who are deconstructing, especially out of conservative fundamentalism, where the politics and the religion are so tightly tied. And I hadn't done that. I hadn't done that work at all. And I had to do that after I had the stroke because, well, you know, a lot of the stuff that I believed as a conservative just wasn't true. I didn't believe it was true. I was just doing it because I was told to do it.
Yeah, we all were, for sure.
And yeah. And I mean, we could say the same thing about people who, like, any system, you know, it doesn't, I don't want to pick on, I really don't want to pick on conservatives. You know, like, I came from a conservative background. I don't want to pick on people for
I'll pick
believing
on them
that
for
stuff.
you.
It's just, okay. It's just, it's not my deal. Okay. Like, I don't want to get too far into politics. I'm just saying, like, this happened to me. I had this shift. So there's a senator, Fetterman, I think, out of Pennsylvania, and he had a stroke, and he has done a 180 in terms of his thinking. where he used to be very, very liberal and ran on this super liberal platform and whatever. And after his stroke, he is rigid fundamentalist thinking. And all I can think is, thank God that my stroke happened where it did, because if it had happened where his did, I'd be in rigid fundamentalist thinking. And I'd never know the difference. I would have no clue. So after I healed from it, prayers are just thoughts. The deity that I'd chattered to for years and years and years is gone. I have no connection to that. It doesn't, I mean, my beliefs weren't like, since my beliefs weren't Christian necessarily, it's not really pertinent to this. It was not a hard loss for me like it would have been had I been still super tied to Christianity at that point. But I found a lot of peace with that. I was actually able to, I think, let go of the idea that Yahweh was real, because I think I had held on to that. So I'm sorry, I'm in a new location here and I don't have table space to lean on, and I was trying to lean forward and that's not going to work. The humans have a spectrum of abilities and characteristics, right? And so that's what makes us human, because we're all within that spectrum, but we're all in different places on it. And so when you have a kid who has the ability to mentally, I shouldn't say a kid, you have people who have the ability to mentally visualize things very, very strongly. And then you have people who have mind blindness. And there is a word for that, which I've forgotten and did not write down, where they can't see anything in their thoughts. It's like black inside, but they still have thoughts. Okay. Whereas I have a full visual experience, less so after the stroke. But it's still pretty vivid. My father is an eyes open person, where like he can see what's around him and he'll talk with his hands and stuff like that. And he actually gets a little upset when other people can't see what he's seeing. He's old. You know, it is what it is. And there are also people who can hear things in their heads. It's called audiation. Some people have a very strong internal monologue. I have a strong internal monologue. I used to be able to hear songs in my heads. There are people who can compose music in their heads and they actually hear it. And others are deaf in their minds. They don't have an internal monologue. They don't hear inside their heads. They just have thoughts. My husband is one of those. So when I read a book, the book springs up like a movie in my brain. It takes me a long time to read a book because I have to build this whole mental image and this whole scene where everything is happening and it's really cool, right? And he just flies through books because it's all on thoughts. So he gets to read more stories than I do. And it is more mentally taxing for me now to do a full visualization experience, which is probably why I am not seeing ghosts and demons and whatever else anymore, because my brain's like, no, we don't want to do that. That'll give us a headache. But this was all just imagination stuff, and it has to do with brain structure. And it has to do with being, I think we've said this a million times now, but it has to do with being reinforced that I was seeing these things, that these were real. Whereas if I had grown up in a secular household like my son, he sees these things too, but he understands that they're his imagination. He understands that the imaginary friend is his own creation. He understands that what pareidolia is. Nobody told me what pareidolia was. And so, you know, when you have a pareidolia experience where you think something,
I'm sorry, you froze there.
and it's not really there. It's like, oh,
I'm sorry, start that sentence again.
When you think that something,
I'm sorry, you froze again. I think we're having a little internet
experience.
connection. Sorry,
Okay.
it happened again. Start that one more time. Third time's the charm.
Okay, All right, let's try that again. So when you're having a pareidolia experience where you think you're seeing a face in like a nature thing or like city lights or something like that, and you don't know what pareidolia is, you might think that you're having a mystical experience. Um, and so I think the thing is even if somebody had told me what pareidolia was and what hyperphantasia was, and that stress can bring on dissociative episodes, like what I experienced at my wedding, and when you're having a sleep wake disconnect between your sleep wake cycles, which I'd have some vocab words for you later, um, that I would not have believed them. I think that if I had had that information when I was younger, I would have said, "Oh no, that you just don't know. Science just hasn't caught up to ghosts and stuff like that." I think that it took years and the stroke and all these changes and the weight of evidence and stuff like that over time for me to say, "Okay, yeah, this is actually normal human brain stuff," and I just superimposed mythology on top of it. Um, so one of the things that I want to emphasize in this is that um, there's a difference between imagination and hallucination. Um, hallucination, okay, practically speaking, there is no difference between imagination and hallucination. Okay, they happen in the same place in your brain. All right. Um, but practically speaking, the difference is you know that this is imaginary or you do not know it's imaginary. So it's a hallucination if you don't understand that it's your imagination. Um, and this can happen with mental illness cases. And oftentimes, schizophrenia is the one that pops into everybody's mind because that's like, okay, you're seeing things and you're hearing voices, right? And you can't tell what's real and what's not. Well, a lot of people who have schizophrenia can tell. It's just that those things are really annoying. Um, and so certain medications can help to dull that, but those also dull your shine. And so a lot of people don't want to give up their wonderful imaginary world to live in the real world and feel like, oh, like I take migraine medication that's like, oh, but I like to be able to see. I do still have some visual snow and stuff like that that's left over from that. It's not anything I can control. I have to take medication to make it go away. It helps, you know. So another thing is that I don't think that I touched on this just a little bit ago, but I don't think that beliefs are a choice. I mean, you didn't choose to deconvert, right?
I mean, I didn't choose in one sense. I chose to do the investigation, but yeah, I know what you're going at for that.
Mhm.
Eventually, it becomes inevitable where you can't
Yeah,
deny it's right in front of your face that this doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah.
yeah. I did not choose to give up my belief in my God. I chose to leave Christianity. That was a deliberate choice on my part because I was in danger. I was not in a safe place. Um, and I just could not make myself believe in Christianity after that experience. And if somebody wants to call it church hurt, they can. They can have that term. I don't care. Okay. We want to split hairs over church hurt, religious trauma, whatever. What happened to me was nutty buggers. Okay. Um, went to a bad church. Yes. Um, so,
It's an understatement. I was understatement of the year.
yeah. Yeah. Right. I'm like, "Ugh." um, so, but my brain changed in an instant when I had the stroke. And as it healed, I no longer believed. That was not a choice that I made. That was just something that happened to me. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, some people make a deliberate choice. Like, on one hand, yes, I made a deliberate choice to leave Christianity. And on the other hand, I did not deliberately choose to stop believing in God. This just happened. And I think that the same thing can happen, like what that happened with you. The weight of the evidence in your experience did not leave you with a choice to keep believing. You, like, if you stayed, are you lying to yourself? Are you lying to your congregation? Like where is your integrity in that?
Yeah.
Like, can you do that?
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
I
there are a
mean,
few
maybe some
people.
people
You come
can.
across pastors that do it occasionally for a short time because they don't have a way to support their families yet. But yeah, it's like
Yeah,
you got to move on pretty quickly, otherwise you're basically a
yeah,
liar at that point.
yeah. And it becomes harder and harder to lie. You know, if you have integrity. I mean, I'm sure there are people who don't have any problem lying whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, I think, let's see, I already did. Oh, waking dreams. I did want to talk about waking dreams. So the Easter Bunny is what was called a waking dream. And there are some technical things that happen in this. And this is also something like the incubus or the sleep paralysis demons, or like the shadow figures that you see by your closet. Okay. Those are waking dreams. And it's when the mind is waking from a dream after the eyes are open. And so your brain has superimposed a dream image or a dream sensation over the top of your waking mind. And so the two states of mind are getting confused. And when I saw the glitter sparkles, and the Easter Bunny was not the only time where I saw this glitter sparkle thing where the image disappeared in a sparkle of glitters, has to do with brain chemistry. I forget what the chemicals are in the brain that happens when you're going from a sleep state to a wake state, but I really see those because you're asleep when it happens.
Yeah.
Um, so that's how I saw the Easter Bunny. It was just a dream.
Mm. Did you ever have sleep paralysis?
Yeah, I get it occasionally. If you get it too much, you should talk to your doctor because it's not super healthy.
Yeah.
Um, I probably have sleep paralysis once every few years. Usually when
Yeah.
I'm sick.
I had it many years ago for a while, but I had one interview maybe a year ago who really associated it with demonic oppression pretty heavily, and he felt like he
Hmm.
was like, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly, that it was like a part of his spiritual experience. Like this was the demons were real to him because he couldn't wake up. He was like screaming, and you
yeah,
scream, you sort of scream in your head to please give me my body back. I want to move, and it is crazy though how we associate the spiritual supernatural world with things that are very physical.
hmm,
And it's interesting how you can see even like in the Gospels where somebody's foaming at the mouth and going crazy. Oh, that's a demon, so cast it out. Well, now we'd say that's probably a mental health issue, and they need some
yeah,
therapy and some medicine. It's amazing how
hmm,
when you see it from a scientific perspective, it all changes. It's like night and day.
yeah, yeah. And one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about all of this is because I was so steeped in this, and I would have been one of those people who were, if I had that, the pressing on the chest. Oh, I had a demon on me last night. Like this. I've got to close the portals, and I've got to pray harder, and I've got to whatever. I was that person, and it's just a sleep wake state. It's a
Yeah.
natural thing that happens to people. Same thing with the pareidolia, where you're seeing faces in trees or in city streets. Same thing with the imagination thing. If you're a person with a vivid imagination, your brain can sometimes just kick stuff up. And one of the things that would happen to me oftentimes is when the ghosts noticed that I was seeing them, they would disappear. This was my interpretation of this. When the ghosts realized they were being observed, they would disappear. Well, what was
Hmm.
happening is when I realized that what I was seeing wasn't real, my brain erased it. Uh, But when you're in it, you can't understand that. But I also want people to understand that it's okay to have those experiences. So grief hallucinations are a thing that happens to people regularly. This is not a mental health issue. This is totally normal. So I've had several grief hallucinations. dreaming about your past loved ones is very, very normal. I get to visit my best friend in my dreams a lot. Well, not as much as she's been gone 9 years. I don't get to see her as much anymore. That as she fades in the distance, I don't get to visit as much. But when my grandmother was cremated, I had a waking dream that she came and brushed my forehead and said, "I love you," and I said, "I love you too." And that was the last time I ever spoke to my grandmother. And this was after she was dead. And it's a grief hallucination. My mother-in-law actually had to move houses because she kept seeing my father-in-law after he passed away, because it was driving her crazy. And she's not the kind of person who believes in ghosts, but she kept seeing him. And I never saw him, but he wasn't the love of my life either. Like I did love him. I thought he was a wonderful person. But but it's very normal. And one of the big dangers that both fundamentalist Christians and hardcore atheists run into is erasing these very normal human experiences. On the one hand, the Christian thinks it's demons, right? Well, it's not. It's just your brain. And the atheist is like, "Oh, it's just your brain," and they want to discount all of it. Well, yeah, it's your brain. This is where you live. This is you. It's okay to experience those things. And they can be very healing. Like when I visit with my best friend in my dreams, I always, it's wonderful to have seen her again, because I'll never get to see her again. And I know that in Christianity, they're like, well, you could see her in heaven. Well, she was a staunch atheist. According to Christianity, she's in hell. Maybe I could see her in hell.
Get a lakeside cabin, the Lake of Fire, right?
Right. Yeah. So also, as you mentioned, drugs can cause hallucinations. If this happens, this is definitely something you have to talk to your doctor about. I'm talking about prescription drugs. There is a thing that's very interesting to me. People who are in end stage conditions can often do a guided therapy on mushrooms, hallucinogenic mushrooms, and they lose their fear of death. They tend to have wonderful experiences. They tend to be very much at peace. Their pain levels go down. And I think that's very therapeutic, and it's brain stuff. And it's very spiritual, but your spiritual self is within your brain. So
yeah. It's interesting how much you've shared about the brain, and my experience was not at all like yours, and probably 80-90% of your experience. But the one crossover that does relate a little bit was I had very severe insomnia my entire life, hardcore insomnia. It started when I was a kid in math class. The day that they teach you how to make a fraction into a decimal, like 3/4 equals 0.75. The day I learned that, my brain like went, brrr, oh wow, this is crazy cool. It was like all the lights came on all of a sudden, and I loved it. I thought I was some kind of smart, genius or something, because I could do it so fast, and I could find these little patterns, and I wasn't. I'm not some kind of beautiful mind guy. It was like little math OCD. It immediately, like within a few days, it became a huge life altering problem because I could not stop it. And I would cry myself to sleep as a kid because I could not stop the computer doing the math in my mind. And after about a year, the math stopped. But I then had insomnia for like 25 years, severe, hardcore insomnia that got worse and worse and worse. And I was a guinea pig, and I tried all this medicine, all these therapies, get all these sleep doctors. And I moved from Pennsylvania to Georgia for a very special doctor who you would have otherwise thought of as a quack. And he did the weirdest tests on me. And when it's done, he said, "Oh, it's real easy." He's like, "I can fix this in a month with no medicine." I was like, number one, I was thinking, I'm not sure if I believe that, because this has been like a 25, 30-year process. And number two, you're a little bit of a quack. But at the same time, like, maybe like nothing else has worked. Why not try it? And he's like, "Listen, I want you to understand something. Your brain isn't damaged, but something happened when you were a kid that made half of it just start screaming like on blast, megaphone style. The other half got real quiet." He said, "We're just going to even them up. And it's just
Mhm.
amazing stuff. And I'll share that story another time. I've shared it a few times, but it brings out the point of it all is that your brain is something that can be very mysterious, and you have to think to
Yeah.
yourself that some of the things that you're doing are definitely trauma related, but some of them, whether they're starting at trauma or not, they're some of the things you're doing and feeling and thinking or how you're responding, they're part of your brain doing stuff. Like I've noticed even this past week, I'm healing a lot from some of this trauma from the divorce and the custody battle that I just went through.
Mhm.
And I literally at times, even this week, feel like someone like stuck an IV of depression in me and just start like dripping it in me like,
Mhm.
wow, this hurts. This hurts so damn much. And it just like all the lights go out quick. Just this past week it's happening. I'm like, your brain is doing all kinds of things to you.
Mhm.
And the one thing I wanted to mention too that I think is interesting, and then I want you to be able to bring us to a close because we've been going for a while. But as you were talking about all this stuff and all these ways that the brain's working for you and the people around you, it makes you question at some point, what if the Apostle Paul, that wonderful man who started this whole, nightmare called Christianity, like what if the Apostle Paul was just seeing shit in his head
He
because
was
of
just saying
some
shit in his
trauma from
head.
a
Yeah.
kid? And he says he
Yeah.
was on the road to Damascus, whatever, and he fell off his horse and saw the. And I know that that's probably not none of that's probably real, but just saying
Mhm.
if imagine for a minute that he had been a real person and that he really had fallen off of his horse because thought he heard something from heaven and had this conversation with the risen Jesus, telling him now it's time to
Mhm.
start your life over as a Christian. What if that was just this guy whose brain was going haywire? Like, and what
Yeah.
if Christianity literally is just somebody who had a mental health issue and obviously a lot of
Mhm.
unhealed trauma, and for 2,000 years, we've been following this guy that was just a little bit off and a little bit damaged and a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, if he lived here today, we would say something like, there's some really good therapists, like, and if he was alive today, he'd probably say, "Yeah, you're right. I probably should consider some medicine for this." But back
Yeah.
then, none of those conversations existed, and so a
Mhm.
guy like that can all of a sudden take off as like a cult leader, and nobody questions his mental health. They just say, "Oh, I guess you really did see a vision, so I guess we need to listen and obey." I think,
Yeah.
what if
Yeah.
Christianity is just a mental health issue from the beginning, the core of it, you know?
Well, I mean, I had a vision of Jesus. Like, ah. And I know it wasn't real. To me, the experience was real. Okay. And I don't, the thing is, because it was such a wonderful experience, I don't want the internet picking over it, and which I know they will, which is fine, whatever. But that was very dear to me, even though I understand that this was my own brain. Just having that mental experience was wonderful. And so if I were the kind of person who had been in a place where I was primed for conversion, that probably would have been it. Um, but I wasn't. Um, and the version that I saw of this God was nothing like what this God is like in the literature. Um, and so there's an automatic disconnect there. Like, I know that this was me. This was my ideal Jesus. This was not first century apocalyptic preacher Jesus. That was not a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
so um,
I know you have some
there
notes. I
is,
do wanna
yeah,
ask you some
yeah. Go
questions soon,
ahead.
but feel free to go. No,
Yeah, yeah.
I
Go
wanna
ahead.
make sure you get your notes. Well, I guess the big thing is just at a certain point, my main question, and of course, the money shot of this channel, if you put it that way, is the idea of what was it like when you were able to really finally voice the words, "I don't believe," and, like, how did that affect you? Was it a relief? Was it a fear? Was it, just the answer to all your hard questions, or was it like, "Oh, no, this is my life has turned into a nightmare now that there's no God?" What was that like, and what was it like sort of just starting the process of your new life, reclaiming your identity?
So there's two answers there. Because I had two versions of God. First one was leaving Christianity, which fight tooth and nail to try and get out of it. Kept getting sucked back in by my friends and my friends' parents, and getting browbeaten of this is real, your eternal soul is in danger. I mean, it's just huge peer pressure. And when I was finally able to move away, it was a huge relief. It was like all of a sudden I'm not being told to believe stuff that isn't true. Um, and I went on a whole healing journey. And there was other bad stuff that happened, which is irrelevant towards religion. I don't need to talk about that. But like little road bumps in life and stuff like that. But with the stroke, it was a realization that I had not been praying for a while. That the connection that I felt to this God had been gone for a long time, and I just sort of didn't notice it. And it was like, oh, but there was no punitive theology attached to it, so that makes a big difference. And nothing, because of the beliefs that I had, like nothing really changes, I guess. Like the universe still exists, so I'm just not putting a spooky gloss over the top of it. So there's no big difference in terms of going from deism to going to agnosticism in practical terms. It's just because it's not an involved God. But going from Christianity to not Christianity, huge relief, and also giant social pressure cooker.
Yeah. It's crazy how much your community was it was so wackadoodle, but at the same time, they were all about Jesus. I can see how you would be really ostracized for not believing. So did you feel like you could share this journey with anybody, or did you keep this all to yourself for the most part?
I had the pagan community to share it with, and like I said, most of them are ex-evangelicals, so they understood. And I say community, there's like 5 of us.
It's better than nothing. Better than nothing.
Better than none. Better than none. And we've all kept in contact, even though we've moved away. And there's a couple who have moved back. But there's Facebook. It's great. But a lot of us don't talk about it. We are not out. I would never out any of my friends because they would lose family. They could lose their jobs. Whereas I'm self-employed, my family knows who I am. I don't care. Like my income does not depend on this. My artwork goes with other people. My name's not attached to it. They don't know. So, it doesn't impact me. Being out does not impact my income. Whereas if I were to out somebody else who is a pagan, who's masquerading as a Christian, that could seriously negatively impact their life. And I would never do that. So.
Well, did you mention your husband before? Were you able to talk with him about this pretty openly, or did?
Yeah.
Was he tracking with you? Does he agree?
Oh yeah. He's an ex-Catholic, former Catholic, and he's agnostic atheist since he was a teenager. No problems. He said his parents were a little bit upset for a little while, and they were like, well, not much we could do about it. But his father was an atheist. So, I didn't know that his father was Catholic until his funeral. I was very surprised.
Yeah. Well, I'm bringing it. Bringing it to more to the current day. How has the journey been since your deconversion? How long ago was that? Like, how many years ago are we talking about? And what has it been like since then?
So it has been over 30 years since I have not been a Christian. Firmly. Okay. And then I had the social pressure throughout my later teens. And from being an agnostic, I have to do some math here. Hang on. It has been 14 years. I had the stroke 14 years ago this summer. 14 or 15. Shoot. I don't remember.
No, that was when your brain just said, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. And I didn't realize it. You know, it took me a few years to realize, because I mean, it took me 4 years to recover from the stroke. You know, I had to learn to eat
Wow.
again. I had to learn to walk and speak again. It was just 2 years ago that I was able to start driving again.
Mm.
Um, so my son grew up with a mother who couldn't drive. And I had a baby the year after I had the stroke. Uh, um, you know, like
Wow.
I had the stroke and they cleared me medically and I got pregnant again and I had the baby. So I was trying to raise my infant son at the same time as I was recovering from a stroke. That was fun. We both learned to eat soup together. It was great.
You've been through so many different crazy things. Well, in the 14, 15 years since you truly can say you definitely drew your line in the sand, what has it been like sort of reclaiming your identity, and how are you doing with things at this point?
I put myself back in therapy because I started to come across a lot of health issues that are stress related. They kept telling me, you need to reduce your stress, you need to reduce your stress. And I'm like, I'm not stressed. And then I realized that all of this childhood trauma and early adulthood trauma that I went through causes stress that I may not be thinking of in the forefront of my brain, but my body is telling the tale. Like I can't lose weight. Um, I'm eating 1,200 calories a day. I can't lose weight. This is ridiculous, you know, and that's because the stress is holding on to it. The cortisol levels are super high, and that showed up in a blood test. They're like, I'm never going to lose weight when my cortisol levels are this high. Um,
Wow.
and you know, I developed asthma, and my vision started having really bad migraines.
I'm sorry, your vision started
And of
what?
course, a lot of that stuff. Oh,
You broke up there. What was
my
that? Your
vision
vision started
started
to what?
going in and out. My vision
Okay.
started going in and out, where it would close in. Um, and that's a migraine issue, but it's also stress. And part of it's perimenopause. You know, I am a woman of a certain age. This can start to happen, but a lot of that when you have childhood traumas, they do make these things worse. And so unfortunately I do have to deal with them. And so a large part of my therapy has been a second deconstruction from Christianity and from all of these childhood superstitions and mythologies that negatively impacted me. Um, and so, you know, in growing up as a neurodiverse kid in an era when that wasn't even known to exist, you know, just because we didn't know about it doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Um, and so there were no accommodations. Um, like we just didn't know. Um, and yeah, um, I do love the mythology. I've always loved mythology. And I think one of the most healing things for me in this journey is actually going back through and reading the Bible and then talking about it on the YouTube channel. I don't care if anybody watches it. Some of it's really boring, but just me untangling all of that stuff that I was yelled at about, or that I was shamed for questioning, or having a different interpretation of things, or saying, "Hey, this is harmful." Has been wonderful for me because I can voice it now, and I could never voice those things. I always got shut down.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, it's
so
amazing to have your voice back and so much autonomy that you didn't know you had lost, and get
mhm,
to start to claim it back. When you look at this, I did want to ask, how do you raise your kids differently, knowing where you've been, both in terms of the religious trauma, as well as the fact that mythology and the theology does hurt people? It does psychologically
mhm.
abuse children. Like, how has this affected how you raise your kids?
So my husband and I talked about this before we ever had kids. My son is very planned. We wanted two, but we got one. Um, and we decided that we will raise him in a secular way. He can be any religion he wants. He can make that decision on his own. We will not pressure him. We will not stop him as long as it's not harmful. We have talked to him about the dangers of cults. Um, and we've gone over the world religions with him. We've taught all of them as mythology, um, as cultural heritage. And I've always told him, if you want to believe in something, if something grabs your heart, if you want to explore it, you are more than welcome to. Like, I will drive you to church. And I will stay with you because, and I don't want to blame my parents for this. I know it's one of those things where it's like, no, people, your parents should take responsibility. Well, my parents had jobs that they had to go to. They had their lives, and they thought that they were being responsible. They thought that they were doing the right thing, and I did not talk to them about it. So there was a communication issue there. So I'm not going to blame my parents for something that, they fixed it when they knew about it. So that, you know, but I would never leave my son alone in that sort of situation.
Yeah.
Just because I was left alone in it and I know what happened.
Hmm.
So my son is agnostic. He has opted to believe in reincarnation because he finds it comforting. He was having a lot of fear of death, and I was like, well, there's a bunch of afterlife options that we have options. You could choose from them. It's okay. And he was like, I like the idea of reincarnation. I was like, yeah, I do too. It's kind of cool. So go for it. It's fine. Like you aren't going to find out until after you die anyway. So, if it brings you comfort, go ahead.
That's awesome that you gave him that choice and that empowerment and the ability to just do what was best for him. That's so cool. I mean, that's to me, that's the golden piece of it is not just to give them the understanding of where the mythology of Christianity came from, and not just to expose, all world religions for how they have evolved and where they probably started from, but also just to give kids that freedom to say, you don't have to be like me. You don't have to be an atheist or an
Mhm.
agnostic. The biggest thing is this is your journey, and to give people the power. That's so critical. I love it. I'm so glad, so proud of you for
Mhm.
giving your son that freedom. Because man, oh man, what a gift! What a gift! And to know that he can change it again if he, hopefully
Mhm.
it's less about over time as we all mature. Hopefully it's less about this feels right and more about this is where the evidence leads. That's the
Mhm.
big thing for me too. Is like, where does the evidence lead? Is this something I can verify in some way? And
Mhm.
hopefully, as he has that mentality, he just keeps on asking good questions. Hopefully, his answers will get better and better and better. And but all the way, no matter where he lands, and no matter where any of our kids lands, just the idea and the knowledge that we have given them the freedom of saying, you have thought autonomy, and you don't have to be like me, and
Mhm.
that's okay. And I'll respect your differences. It's cool.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I know we've talked through
It's
a
it's
ton.
very important. Yeah. Go ahead.
We've talked through a ton. I know we're here almost at 2 hours, but I know you went through quite a few notes. Was there anything else in your notes that I didn't let you get to? I didn't want to cut you off from there. Was there anything else you had on your heart to share?
Um, I think that was it. All I did was a sketch of. I mean, you're looking at what I'm looking at. So, um, the one thing that I did want to talk about, actually, I do want to talk about this a little bit. There are a bunch of different terms and vocabulary words of within atheism and agnosticism. And I think that it's really worth looking into those for people who are doubting and deconstructing, because there is more to this than just atheist agnostic. Um, and I identify as a euhemerist, which is a person who believes that gods are made through stories. So I will not say God isn't real. Okay. Do I think God actually exists? No. But within our mythologies and stories, these gods exist. Where they came from is fascinating to me. I love that. And these are cultural stories. We tell these stories for a reason, right? Um, and you don't have to believe them, but that's just where I fall in this range of beliefs right now, because I know obviously it's going to change. It's changed for me multiple times over my life, but having the vocabulary to name those things is incredibly important. Words are very empowering. Um, if I if I had known that the word deconstruction existed years ago, I would have been in a much better place. I didn't learn the word deconstruction until last year. Um, so words are empowering, words matter.
Hmm, I love it. It's so true, and I found the same thing, especially when I find people that can give really good word pictures or poetic pictures. It inspires you to think I think you took the words out of my mouth, and that's exactly how I feel. I wish I could have said it that way,
Mhm.
but you find people that inspire us, and that happens all the time, especially with me listening to the great interviewees that come on the channel, and you all of a sudden find that some of the healing and the processing, it would have never really happened um, until you had the right words for it. And it's where I think
Mhm.
for me, learning things like some of the terms you're talking about, but also just learning psychological words and counseling terms and shadow work
Mhm.
terms, it all adds up to eventually you get the verbiage and the sense of how to slice and dice this. Even things like just talking through what are the traits of a narcissist and what are the traits of a
Mhm.
psychopath. You begin to learn that. And that's of course how some of us deconstruct Yahweh. You're like, all right, writing's on the wall.
He's a
Yahweh's is,
narcissist.
yeah, and a psychopath. He's nuts. Um, but once you learn that stuff, it helps you in your certainly your real life relationships, but also in your spiritual, religious
Mhm.
deconstruction. To say maybe there's some of these concepts apply to what I'm thinking through on the supernatural level, and also I think just the fact that so many of us in this world, I think we're just as much as there's a lot of bad stuff going on in this world, there's an awful lot of conversations, at least that I observe all the time, about about the idea of what a toxic relationship does and does not look like, what a healthy one looks
Mhm.
like. The idea of respecting people's boundaries and all kinds of things. It feels like every time I flip on Facebook or Instagram or anything, it's somebody making a point about how they're healing from something toxic or they made a choice
Mhm.
with their boundaries and something, but like everybody's talking about how to not live a toxic life or let toxic people hurt you anymore. And I feel like even just the fact that those conversations occur on a regular basis in our society, that's a really good sign. I mean, there's a lot of toxicity
Yeah.
that we're not getting rid of that we arguably should, but the fact that everyone's more and more aware of it is at least a good sign. So
Mhm.
anyway, well, I appreciate you. You've given us a lot to chew on, and again, I think you need to really consider writing a book. I think your YouTube channels will help you with that, but you need to write a book, and when you do, definitely let me know if that ever happens. I'd be glad to have you back on to put it on blast. But this has been so good to hear your story. You've got a lot to share and a lot of great insights, and I appreciate too your vulnerability. A lot of people would probably gloss over a lot of the stuff that you went through, and you went through a ton. A lot of it arguably very very nightmarish, and we're certainly sorry for
Therapy
what you've been
helps.
through. Therapy helps, yeah, but the fact that you're willing to come on a channel like this and share your story and be vulnerable means a lot because there's
Mhm.
probably some people that went through some things where it's the same or similar enough where they can relate, and you've probably given
Yeah.
some people some real hope. So, well, I know I've chatted here a lot in the last few minutes here, but give us a final word. What would you say to somebody who's going through the hardest parts of this journey?
One step at a time, and give yourself some breaks. It's okay to take a break, but one step at a time.
Hmm. Well said. Well said. Well, if you've got a minute to hang on, I wanted to just read a few quick comments. There's too
Mhm.
many to after going for 2 hours. I'm sure everyone's ready to finish up here shortly, but I just want to start by saying thank you so much to Jonathan for his super chat. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate your support. And Shell says, I'm in and out of the live because I'm out right now, but wow, this is so shocking and not okay. I agree, Gail. No one should be able uh, to say get rid of your medicine as a test of faith and then not face repercussions. Yeah. Priming is such an important process. Music, prayer, and weekly sermons are all part of keeping that priming so you keep seeing the hand of God in everything because you're then ready to see it. Yeah. Shannon says, I've channeled music and have seen ghost like entities while meditating. Interesting. Shell
Mhm.
says, it puts your brain into that space where you're more susceptible to suggestion and more likely to see agency and natural phenomena, dim lighting, and music. Yeah. The two
Mhm.
traditions are sewn together from talking about from the Old Testament. Yeah. And then Mark says, oh, yeah, I remember being surprised when I actually read the Joseph story for myself. It was so obviously stitched together badly. Yeah. Let's see here. The religious pressure cooker. I love that analogy. It takes normal human issues and filters it down through a worldview that then requires so much cognitive dissonance to keep believing. Jonathan says, yes, when your brains are primed, the imagination is wild. Squashing it down, keeping it quiet for the sake of unity and cohesion so we can continue preaching the gospel. Never mind the damage it does to keep quiet and not address things. Yeah. Mark says, Gail, I'm also autistic. Mark's representing us from the UK. It's great to have you here, Mark. And let's see here. Shell says, woot woot, fellow neurodivergents in the house. Nice. Jade says, probably using Matthew 18 as justification for not involving the authorities. Yeah. Um,
Mhm.
Neurodivergents are so annoying to people who lie because they question so much. Yeah. Um, Jonathan says, never question anything is a popular theme amongst churches and congregations, because once people saw behind the curtains where Christianity came from, there's no one seeing it. Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to read a few more, but if you have any you want to respond to, just feel free to jump in. Let's see here. When I would question creationism, because we actually had a zoologist and a geologist in the congregation, but they just clammed up, it was a no-go subject. Yeah. Smart Christians can get good at managing cognitive dissonance. Yep. She was evil for being a woman and having black hair and seeing too much. LOL. Colors can be evil. Yeah. It's crazy.
Let me jump in real quick here. Oh man, my cousin is a colors are evil person, and when I was in art school, I was explaining to her how colors work, and she said something about, "I'm so glad that you're not dressing in black anymore. That's so it was so creepy," or something like that. And like I just happened to be wearing a colorful dress that day. Like most of my closet was black back home, and I was like, "You do understand that black is all colors, right?" Like she just no concept of how this stuff works. It was just assigning moral values to colors. It was crazy.
That's nuts. It's interesting too that, I mean, there's probably some biblical stories where bread comes in, certainly the blood of Christ, there is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, right? Like we're really gonna be against his blood, red blood. Shell says, I would not make the square. I feel that tried so hard to make it all fit together like a perfect puzzle. You can do it until you drive yourself crazy because it will never all fit. Yeah. Jade says, well, to have all that happen in such a young age, that must have been so hard. It sucks to be tied to something you have rightly found to be harmful because you still have a stake in the game, whether that be with kids, family, land, or just reputation in a highly religious town. When awareness is considered demonic, now that should raise red flags. Yeah. Shell says, it's good to remember that all these superstitious beliefs were prevalent and pervasive in small, uneducated tribes and towns where street prophets like Jesus were convincing people of miracles. Superstitions were people's first real stab at science, and they just didn't have the method perfected to test things in controlled conditions to confirm them. Yeah, exactly. People would make hypotheses, and then they would live on without proper testing through hearsay perpetuated by anecdotal evidence. Yeah, exactly. Shell says, Gail, I'm so enjoying this live and the humor you bring to the table to deal with some of the wild and crazy messed up things that happened to you. Sometimes laughter is the best medicine, being able to laugh at how messed up and crazy things were.
Yeah, trying to keep a sense of good humor. I mean, I'm a very happy person anyway. I'm also excellent at compartmentalization. I could just shove those bad things in a box and forget about them.
I think we're all pretty good at that on some level, yeah. The crazier the creds exhibited by those around you who believe, the more easy to believe, because if others are willing to do crazy things for faith, it gives credibility to their faith. Yeah, numerous people reading the Bible, and they're all coming to very different conclusions as to how the text is to be interpreted and what it truly means. That shows the Holy Spirit is non-existent. Yeah. Yeah, and Shannon referring to the garments there of the Mormons. The no coffee rule of LDS is a deal breaker. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's crazy that they would add that. It's nuts. That's why cults will have people engage in really crazy things like the Mormon underwear. And then there is the element of secrecy and privileged knowledge to keep you wanting more. Yeah. Let's see here. Shell says, that's a really good point. When people see Jesus, if you asked them to describe him, it would probably be the Da Vinci version of Jesus, not Middle Eastern Jesus. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to skip a little bit for the sake of coming towards the end here. Autism and ADHD can be so frustrating because we have a hard time communicating everything we experience, I think, even if our disability doesn't limit our speech or language. Yeah. It's like trying to explain color to someone who can only see black and white. Sometimes we're seeing the world through such a different lens, or vice versa, trying to explain black and white to someone who sees color. It's not always that one is better than the other, just different. Yeah. I've often wondered too on that note, like, does God hold everyone, the biblical God here, does God hold everyone accountable based on their brains doing different things? It's like, if you realize that for an autistic person, believing in Christianity might be so much more difficult because they require so much more evidence, and maybe they're thinking through it on just in a totally different way than everyone else, then does God take them into account, or would he send an autistic person to hell just because they see it differently in their head, the head that he made and the brain that he made that way?
So in the tradition I grew up in, they would say that most autistic people are going to hell. Because
Really?
you're supposed to be made anew in Jesus, and that's going to cure you of your autism, and autism is a demon, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's just, I'm not even sure what to say. That's just so sick. It makes you feel so sick to your heart to think that there's people growing up, and there's still people in that church, right?
Yeah.
There's still people going to that church, still preaching this stuff.
It's much smaller than it was, and the new pastor is not so bad. Is what mine was. My guy was like crazy cult leader. That does not seem to be the case at this point. I mean, I don't go there. Okay, it's just what I hear through the grapevine. But a lot of it's the same congregants. If they haven't passed away or moved away, it's the same 5 families. Like it's a very small town. So.
Well, I hope that they can steer away from all that toxicity anymore. Mark says, Gail, you've done incredible things. Yeah, for sure. What a beautiful conversation. Yeah, really appreciate Gail sharing her story today. This has been great. Yeah, where does the curiosity lead for how we raise our kids? Yeah, let them decide where does your curiosity lead you, and let them decide what's best for their lives ultimately. See here, euhemerism has overlaps with archetypal psychology. Yeah, and we're trying to heal the zeitgeist in our culture. That's for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mark wraps us up here. Thanks, Gail and Tim. And therapy helps. Absolutely. Well, thank you all so much. This has been great. Gail, thank you so much for sharing your story. Again, I appreciate your vulnerability. A lot of great details. You opened my eyes to a whole version of Christianity that I honestly did not. I knew about the snakes, but that's about it. I did not know that things like what you went through existed. And honestly, it's kind of sad and scary. But I do hope that, that we're, as a culture, getting better, and especially being more aware of the psychological damage and physical damage that occurs to children in these contexts, because that's so near and dear to our hearts. But thank you so much again. It's been great to hear your story and great to get to know you. Everybody, the links for Gail's YouTube channels are beneath this video. Please go like and subscribe. And Gail, thank you so much. Great to get to know you today. We'll do it again sometime.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Have a great day.